radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You are listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Good evening. Fade to Black. Bespoke Radio for the masses. How do you do it? Today is Tuesday, January 14th, 2020. 14 days into the new year, only 352 days left. We are live from a bunker that is somewhere in the middle of beautiful downtown Burbank, California. And I would like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States. Hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south, far and near. This is Fade to Black for KJCR, the Game Changer Network, and KGRA, the Planets. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. What is cracking, everybody? How you doing? You like that? It's pretty cool, huh? I mean, you see what's going on, right? You see that? That's what I'm talking about. Now, if you're wondering what everybody is looking at, you got to go to jimmychurchradio.com. You got to become a member. You got to become an official Fadernaut. And when you do that, you get the bunker cam. That's right. Become a game changer. You get the bunker cam, and you can see my Eddie Van Halen shoes. How cool. I mean, seriously, right? I got the matching shirt, too. I was going to wear it tonight. Rita's like, that's a bit much. So, I'm not even allowed to wear it in public. I can wear it to bed. So there you go. Hey, there, yeah, Kevin got those up. Look at that. Those are the official Eddie Van Halen shoes. How cool is that? And just so everybody can see it. But you got to get the bunker cam. My EVH shoes. I mean, they make me so happy. They make me so happy. They're so cool. I mean, those are over the top. Those are over the top. Kevin, you're the best, man. Thank you for doing that. That's really cool. Okay. All right, we got a busy show tonight. Scott Wolter is here, host of America Unearthed. Not only one of our favorite guests here, but a serious pillar of knowledge and somebody that will never stop rolling that rock uphill for us, for this community, for the world. And lots of stuff. Scott always guarantees the big reveal. All right, there's something that is going to burst out here on Fade to Black. Well, tonight we're going to discuss our hidden and lost history and all of his latest research and possibly stuff that is going to be revealed in 2020. Scott is, of course, the host of America Under Earth and has been president of the American Petrographic Services since 1990. Scott is responsible for the independent petrographic analysis testing laboratory where the Kensington Runestone was brought for investigation back in the year 2000. He has been the principal I did it again, Scott. Scott, I did it again. I did it again. The principal say it. Petrographer. You made that word up. It's a made-up word in more than 5,000 investigations throughout the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico, including the evaluation of fire-damaged concrete at the Pentagon following the attacks of September 11, 2001. His websites are thehookedx.com and scottwolteranswers.blogspot, and the links are over at Jimmy Church Radio. Welcome back, Scott. How are you?
I'm doing great, Jimmy. It's always good to sit down and chat with you, and I think we're going to have a good time, as we always do tonight.
Yeah, we do, and our next event is coming up February 7th through the 10th, 2020, right here in Los Angeles at the LAX Hilton, and of course I'm talking about the Conscious Life Expo, and you're going west, young man. You're going to come out and join us. It's going to be a great event, and on Friday night, for the keynote event on Friday, our Ancient Secrets panel, you're going to be one of the featured panelists. And get ready, man. Hollywood is waiting for Scott Wolter.
Well, Scott Wolter is going to be ready. And to be honest with you, I'm really excited about this. I know there's going to be a lot of really great people there. It's going to be fun. And we're going to drop some bombs, some historical bombs, with the new research that we're working on. And I have to tell you, it seems like the last couple of years, things have been coming fast and furious at almost a breakneck pace, but it's just amazing stuff, and it just keeps getting better. But the bottom line is that the story that we have been working on about pre-Columbian Templars coming to America for centuries prior to Chris, who did not set foot on the continent, but they were coming here for centuries, and eventually they handed off the obligation to our founding fathers, who we don't know everything that we thought we did about those guys either, but they handed the obligation on to them, and they finished the job, and we're living in it right here.
Well, before we get started, we've got so much to talk about tonight, but I don't want to let this get away from me. What happened to your Vikings? What happened?
Wow.
I know.
That really hurts.
I know it doesn't. It does not, man. You guys had a great season, but what happened?
Well, we did. And, I'm a season ticket holder, so I'm at every home game. And, I've been a long-suffering Viking fan. And believe it or not, for those that are old enough to remember, a good friend of mine is Bud Grant. I was just over at his house a couple of days ago.
Holy crap.
And I've talked with him about the Vikings over the years, and of course, it's been an exercise in frustration, so we kind of expect them to break our hearts, although one of these years. But this year, Jim, to be honest with you, one of the things that we just don't have is a reliable offensive line. We've got great receivers. We've got a fabulous running back. And, a lot of people want to pick on Kirk Cousins, but he's a very accurate passer when he has time. And, that, quite frankly, was one of the biggest issues we have. I mean, I don't care how great you are, Tom Brady, Mahomes, any of the great quarterbacks. If you don't give them time, they're not going to do anything. So I think we need to work on our offensive line. We need to work on our secondary. We had some really bright moments, but we're just not good enough. San Francisco's a great team. I think Kansas City's going to be in the Super Bowl with the Giants, or with the 49ers, and I think the Niners will probably win it. It's hard for me to say, but I think they will.
Green Bay looked pretty solid. I mean...
you know what? I have to tell you, I think Green Bay was the most fraudulent 13-3 team I've ever seen. Look, they're good. Don't get me wrong, and Rodgers is an amazing quarterback, but I think they'll get slaughtered by the 49ers.
Yeah, it's not to, because I used to do a sports show, and I don't do that anymore. But it was a pretty interesting weekend of playoffs, and I watched all four games.
As did I.
Yeah, I watched all four, and the way I look, you don't get there. You don't get there if you don't have a good team. The NFL is absolutely rough. But I really thought I was watching. I honestly thought that the Seahawks were going to pull that one out.
Well, you know what? They shouldn't have punted that last time they had the ball. They had fourth down, and you got to go for it, man. They only had like two minutes, something like that.
There was no question.
Once you give Rodgers the ball, you're probably not going to get it back. So you got to take your chances. I thought that was a dumb call.
Look,
Carroll.
We need to move on, but I'll say this. We'll say. Just let me say this: you don't punt it away. That's it. The season is on the line. That's it. It's over. If you don't make it, you don't make it. But you tried. So there you go. And I wanted to say this before we move on. Some of my fondest memories of all of the NFL, Fran Tarkington. That's it. Okay, let's move on. Okay.
Yep.
All right, let's move on.
We talked about Fran the other day. Bud told me a really good story about him, but I can't tell you because we're moving on. So anyway, going on.
Let's move on. So much to talk about. But this, when it comes to Scott Wolter, does the research come to you and then you go, or are you out there seeking the research and follow it? What happens first? How does it work in your world?
Well, that's a really great question, and the answer is both. Sometimes, I'll give you an example. Just a couple of weeks ago, somebody called me with something that was fantastic. And I don't want to go into the details about this because it is related to the Templar research, but it's also related to other research. I will tell you this. It's related to the Knights of the Golden Circle. And anyway, I got a call from a guy, and his story was so compelling, and his photographs were so interesting to me that collectively he was able to talk me into jumping into my car and driving 9 hours and meeting up with him and spending a day and a half with him, and it was amazing. That's all I'm going to say. And that story is still developing, and I can't say much more than that right now, but it could be one of the biggest things I've ever worked on, if it pans out. And that's all I can say about that. But then there's other times when I'm doing research that is connected to whatever, and I just compel myself and say, look, because of this, this, and this, I got to go. The best example I can give you is when I was initially working on the Kensington runestone. I did my geological work. I produced my findings. I got criticized and attacked. Then I figured out that the first state geologist of Minnesota, Newton Winchell, had also done the same study that I did, or actually I did the same study that he did, and we both came to the same conclusion. He did his 90 years before me. I knew at that point that the stone was real, and therefore everything in that inscription had to be real, and that somebody carved it. They came from some place for some reason. And based on all of that logic, as I like to say, I decided that I had to go over to Sweden to investigate the runes, the dialect, the grammar, and all of that. I went 5 times, Jim, over a period of 2.5 years, and all I can say is it was a revelation. Not only did I find the stuff that I was looking for, but I find stuff that I never expected. And what really is the lesson of that, getting back to your original question, is you don't find things by sitting around talking about it, right? If you develop a theory and you need to get information, you got to go. And I find that when I do go, I usually find something even greater than I was hoping for. And so it's both.
So it's a series. It's a series of breadcrumbs. Right?
Yeah.
And they constantly lay themselves out. And one would suggest that this is your life's mission. The universe knows this. And the synchronicities are laid out for you because of what you are working on. You
know, what you're saying is more prophetic than you realize. And I've come to that realization, and I got to tell you, I'm a science guy, right? Hard evidence, facts, logic, everything has to fit, blah, 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 all that stuff. But as I've gotten older and as I've really delved into this arena more and more, I've come to learn that there are certain things that are going on that don't necessarily follow the laws of logic and scientific method. There's this intuitive, spiritual aspect to this stuff that, to be quite frank with you, I have never explored in my life prior to this, but I have been forced to. And at first it was really uncomfortable for me because it was so foreign, but I'm getting more comfortable with it now, and I got to say, I think it's helping, and if it is, why would I not be open to it?
When we talk about the history of this continent, and that includes Canada, the United States and Central and South America, this entire hemisphere. When we talk about that, it languished out there forever. You have the Bering Strait, and you have the ancient civilizations that started to populate here. But by and large, for the civilizations and cultures that were deep into the Mediterranean or Spain and Portugal and the United Kingdom, this was the big mystery, right? This is what was over that horizon. And I'm talking about the year 1000, right? What is over the oceans? But lately, there's been a lot of chatter about the Azores and the possibility of not only pre-Columbian, but pre-everything, and possibly Roman visitation to the Azores when that type of ship, historically speaking, didn't exist. What do you think about that, and are you interested to maybe visit the islands and see what's going on?
Well, I'd be interested in visiting any islands that have potential history to be uncovered. I mean, absolutely. And I think what's happening here, and it's coming at a rapid pace, is we're finding more evidence and more information that is consistent with what we've been saying for a long time, that many cultures from all around the continent were exploring much further than we ever thought they did. And I'm not at all surprised by that. And I think that it's silly for people to try to put constraints on people and on human cultures because, just when you, doesn't this happen all the time? Just when you think a team is down and they have no chance, they rise up and they beat you. And when you put down people and you say they can't do something, that just motivates them to do it and exceed beyond what you thought they could do. So I'm not surprised by any of this at all. I would love to go and document as much as I can, but to say that I was surprised, I'm really not.
The other part of this, which is not aliens, but the other big A, which tends to surface in this type of research, is Atlantis. And but when we're looking at like the Azores or the possibility, it's called Atlantis for a reason. And outside of the Straits of Gibraltar, according to Plato, that something could have been out there. The sea levels and everything have changed over the years, but there is that part of it. But it's one thing to talk about the hooked X if you're on the fringe side of history, but you start to get into Atlantis and dropping the big A, that's when the controversies really start to surface. Are you willing to go there?
Well, yeah. The answer is hell yes. I mean, first off, let's take a step back and what is Atlantis, right? Well, some people think it's a place. I don't think it's a place. I think it's a culture, a highly intelligent culture that existed before the so-called flood. Well, what is the flood that we're talking about? The flood is a worldwide, universal story that all cultures have going back thousands of years, that quite simply is just the melting of the continental ice sheets that we know happened geologically. My God, I studied glacial quaternary geology in college. I know all about this. Happened, 10 to 15,000 years ago. And we also know that something catastrophic happened. Some major worldwide event happened during about 12,500 years ago that has been now called the Younger Dryas period. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a couple of competing theories about what that catastrophic event might have been. People like Graham Hancock adhere to a large meteorite or comet impact that hit the northern hemisphere and triggered the massive disintegration of the ice sheets. People like Robert Schoch, who's a geologist who I highly respect, and I respect Graham too as well, but he thinks there were massive solar flares that caused lightning strikes on the Earth that produced vitrified glass all around the world at the same time, and that would have triggered this massive ice sheet. And I think they've had some competing theories, but the other thing I said to both of them is, why can't both be true? And Randall Carlson has also done a lot of really good work. He's a brilliant guy. But the point is, something happened. It caused the ice sheets to melt. This triggered a rapid rise in sea level of up to 300 to 400 feet. And if you stop and think about it, computer models raising sea level 300 to 400 feet is going to displace cultures all around the world, because most people in ancient times would live on the coastlines because that's where the food is. And you can imagine every one of those cultures is going to document this event and I think what we're talking about is this mythological flood story that they all experienced. But it makes perfect sense to me. And so who was displaced? Well, I think it was this culture that was interacting globally a lot more than anybody realized, to the point where they were really a worldwide, highly advanced culture that we have now labeled as the Atlanteans. I think that's a really good working hypothesis for this whole thing, and I think it's probably true. When it's all said and done, I'll bet you a beer that's what happened.
When you stand, I cannot help but do this, and I do it every single time I'm at the beach, right? And I'll look out. It doesn't matter, the Atlantic, the Pacific Ocean, and I'll look out and stand on the beach and imagine 400, 500 feet of water above where you are standing, and then turn around and look into land and think about what is going to be covered. And I do it all the time.
Everything, just about with the naked eye, right?
Everything.
Yes.
So
now, Jim, do this. You're standing at that same spot, right? And imagine sea level dropping 300 to 400 feet. What would you see that is now water that would be exposed when that water recedes? You know what you would see? About hundreds of thousands of ancient cultural sites. That's what you would see.
There's no question about it. There's no question about it. And with technology the way it is today, and I'm talking about sonar and the ability to map underneath the surface of the ocean. And you can go into Google Earth and see they've been laying this out for quite a while. It's not that accurate, but you can see things. But with the technology that we have today, you would think that this would be in a higher res detail, and we'll get to that point. But that is all of the Indian Ocean floor, all of the Pacific Ocean, all of the Atlantic Ocean, the Arctic, and go and see what's there, which also includes the desert sands of northern Africa. I can only imagine what is underneath all of that sand, because the sand wasn't there not that long ago. It was a tropical area.
And think about the Mediterranean Sea. If you lowered sea level 300 to 400 feet, imagine what's in there. You've had cultures. That's probably been one of the hotbeds of human activity, for thousands of years in the world. What is under those waters? Can you imagine?
And that's why this is, for me, one of the most exciting times to not only have the ability to host a show like this, but to have researchers out there like yourself, like Graham, like Randall, and Robert Schoch, going out there, Robert, and to have researchers out there tipping things over and seeing what's underneath. because we have the ability now to find these things out. And just like we were just talking about things that are really old, Göbekli Tepe right there, right? 7,000 years. Yeah, 7,000 years before Giza. And now, a few dozen miles away from Göbekli Tepe, there's Bonkuklu Tara, which is older than Göbekli Tepe, when Göbekli Tepe wasn't supposed to exist, right? And we're finding out more and more every single day. I think this is truly the most exciting time in history's lost history.
Well, I say the same thing all the time. You know, a lot of people look back and say, oh, well, all the cool things have been discovered. There's nothing left to discover. BS. This is the most exciting time to be alive. There's so much being uncovered, in part, as you said, to new technology. And, you know, I wanted to make a point about the new technology, too. I think we all have heard and realized that, you know, the military stuff that we see, today, that we're knowledgeable about is actually old technology. I mean, the stuff that we're seeing today actually was new technology in the military 15, 20 years ago. So what are they using now that we're not going to hear about for another 10 to 15, 20 years, right? And thinking about the technologies, looking under the ocean, Google Earth, and how it's pretty damn good right now. But imagine the technology that does exist right now that we just don't have access to yet.
What about Antarctica?
Oh, my God. You know what? Just last night I had somebody send me it was a satellite photograph, and he said, look, the ice caps are melting away, and here's the face of an alien. And I looked at it, and sure as hell, it looked just like an alien face. And then I zoomed in on detail, and actually what it was is the way that the snow had piled up in the mountains there. I mean, it was very convincing looking face, but it wasn't the bedrock, it wasn't the melting snow, it actually was the snow. But, you know, that being said, not just in Antarctica, but what about Greenland? I mean, there's all kinds of things being exposed mineral-wise. There's some meteorite impacts that have been exposed since the ice has been melting away in Greenland. I mean, can you imagine what they're going to find down in Antarctica if, you know, global warming continues the way it is? And assuming we survive it, there's going to be all kinds of things found.
Is it possible, we're going to be headed towards a break here in 3 minutes, is it possible with the plate shifts and the continental shifting, the plate tectonics, is it possible that Antarctica was in a different place? That maybe that could even be Atlantis, that it moved to where it was from a more tropical area, like, you know, where Australia sits today. Right.
Well, I guess, to answer your, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold, so if I start, hacking, that's what it is. Well, first off, do the continents shift due to plate tectonics? Well, the answer is absolutely. The problem with that is that it takes a long time. And, if you believe in the current models of, evolution and the development of plants and animals and humans, when Antarctica was connected to the other continents, humans hadn't evolved yet. We didn't exist yet. Now, that's going with the current science as we understand it. I happen to adhere to that. I don't know if anything's going to change that, but I'm not going to put my anchor down in stone with that idea, because you never know, new science may reveal something else. But based on what we know now, that really doesn't make sense. But that doesn't mean that there couldn't have been people living there in the past. It just seems to me that there were other places on the continent, and if these Atlanteans, if you will, were as intelligent as we think, they probably would have found somewhere a little more habitable to hang out. You know what I mean?
Well, if the melt continues like it is, and we know that they have found signs of tropical growth in Antarctica. There's plenty of leaves and trees and things that have been found on there. But if they found evidence of like a campfire, if they found evidence of a Göbekli Tepe down there, would they release that? Would they speak about that, an ancient civilization that predated everything? Or would they keep that hidden?
Well, the correct answer is ethically they should absolutely release it. But that doesn't mean that they will, right? I mean, the whole idea of extraterrestrials and aliens and all of that is something that now they're starting to talk about, and if they're starting to talk about it now, that means they've known for a long time, and let's just assume that is true, and I think the preponderance of evidence is starting to go in that direction. Why did they keep it from us for so long? So you have to really go down that road and say, what would be the reason? Was it to protect people from themselves, that we would all panic and there'd be anarchy in the streets? Well, you know what I believe is that when there's bad news about something, no matter how bad it is, I mean, people react strongly and emotionally, and it's difficult depending on what that news is. But after a while, you pull up your bootstraps, you suck it up, and you have to keep moving, right? And I think people might be shocked at first, but they would settle in pretty quick and get on with life. So I don't think they have to protect us from anything. Just give us the truth and let us handle it. But that doesn't mean that they will.
Our guest tonight is Scott Wolter, America Unearthed. I am your host, Jimmy Church. We'll be right back after this short break on the Game Changer Network and KGRA, The Planet. You can follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. You can follow Scott at Real Scott Wolter. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. If you ever miss the live show, can't be here, the next best thing, get the podcast. It's just $2 per month. It's updated every single night immediately after the live show. We have over 1,160 broadcasts right there in the archives for just $2 a month. Go to jimmychurchradio.com, click on that podcast banner. And now, Scott, let's talk about a big reveal. And this is the thing. When you tell me, and you did, when you say, Jimmy, tonight I'm going to fly a mission. Tonight I'm going to drop a bomb. It's tonight, and I'm always excited about that. So let's start there. I can't wait to ask the questions. But what are you working on right now?
Well, actually, I'm working on a number of things, but the thing that has really come to the forefront is the Cremona document, and it's this is a copy, probably a copy of a 12th century document that tells the story of treasure that was found by Knights Templar. The legendary story that we've all heard about of the Templars going under the Temple Mount in Jerusalem and finding a fantastic treasure. Well, this document chronicles that discovery, and part of what they discovered were documents from the 1st century that talked about other documents from the 1st century that were hidden in a place called the land of Onteora, which was North America, in the 1st century. So we're talking about in 1100 these documents were found that at that time were 1,000 years old, talking about additional documents taken to be hidden over here. Now, the second part of the Cremona document, which is a compilation of documents. It's not just one document. And the second document is about 6 decades older, that chronicles a trip led by a Templar knight by the name of Ralph de Suddeley, who traveled to Denmark to get a woman named Altamara, who was in the Danish king's court, who was a Knights Templar, and de Suddeley had one of his Templar knights was required to marry her before she was allowed to leave, and then she led them to North America to the temple of the goddess where these documents were hidden. It was de Sutherly's mission to recover those first century documents hidden over here. Now, the place where they were hidden was in what we now call the Catskill Mountains. And he did recover some of those documents, not all of them. Then he traveled south to the northern end of what is now Long Island, wintered over, built a boat over the winter, and then sailed back to Europe in 1180. This trip took 3 years total, and then he reported to the Grand Master of the Knights Templar at that time. His name was Odon, and he recorded his deposition was taken. It was recorded, and that is what the Cremona document is, or at least those are the two main parts. Now, other parts of the document include the documents that he recovered. One of those documents was the marriage document of Yeshua ben Yosef, Jesus, son of Joseph, to Miriam of Hasmonia, or Mary Magdalene. That document was so important and so dangerous that it had to be hidden over here, but he recovered that. So we know all that stuff, and I wrote about that in my book. Now, the other thing that you saw in the book, if you get it, you will see that the Cremona document also includes maps. One of those maps, which is a very strange map of Nova Scotia and the surrounding area at the mouth of the St. Lawrence River, was used on the Oak Island show. Now, they didn't really play it up too long because the fact of the matter is Oak Island has nothing to do with the Cremona document story. But it's a cool map, and it's one of the 4 maps. Now, one of the things that was really puzzling for a long time about these maps, and these maps didn't come to my attention until about 5 or 6 years ago through my good friend Don Rue, who was the guy who was the best friend of a colleague in an organization that he worked for who bought the Cremona document back in 1971. And he vetted it for several years and convinced himself by finding one of the shipwrecks and finding the tomb of Altamara that this story was true. And then he was going to write a book about it. And what happened was he went through the same turmoil that I've been through and many other people who dare to venture into the world of alternative history, according to the mainstream academia. Mm-hmm. And he became so frustrated with the way that those academics treated him as he was just trying to get information and understand this document and the history within it, that he said, screw it, I'm not even going to write this book. So he decided he was going to write a novel. And he was well into that, and then he found out that he was terminally ill. So he sold the document to the Vatican. Now, this story is just amazing because the guy that he sold it to represented the Vatican was a guy named Archbishop Paul Marcinkus. And if people are Googling that name right now, you're going to find out that this was the bad guy of the Vatican. I mean, this was a guy who has been accused of killing Pope John Paul I in 1978 by poisoning him. And the reason they think he did it is because he was the only one that had a key to the secret door that got into the Pope's chamber, his sleeping chamber.
Right.
Anyway, if you saw the Da Vinci Code, you remember the albino monk, the really bad guy in the Da Vinci Code movie? That character was patterned after Paul Marcinkus. That's who Jackson sold the document to in 1994. What nobody knew until recently, and Jackson died in 2000, but he left this material to his good friend Don Rue, who's now my friend, and I'm working very closely with him. I have for 13 years. But what I've discovered with Don is that there are bits and pieces of the Cremona document that Bill disseminated to his colleagues after he sold the main document to the Vatican. And those pieces that he parsed out to his friends were the most important pieces to the whole document. The Vatican never got them. which is amazing, which included the cipher phrase that's mandatory for deciphering the Theban alphabet that is the way the document is written in this coded language that the Templars used. It gets a little bit complicated, but the point is this, and I'm getting to this new discovery, is that over the years that I've known Don, a number of his colleagues that he worked with in this agency have passed away, and their estates have left packages for Don that contain the pages of the Cremona document that Jackson left to these guys. Now, this past March of 2019, a guy by the name of John Drake, one of Don's colleagues, passed away. John Drake had a walk-in safe in his house, and his family couldn't get into it until August of this year. When they finally got into it, there was a package in there that was for Don Rue. Don didn't get that package till October, and there was a bunch of stuff in it, including an envelope that was sealed, that he didn't open until this December. And when he opened it, there were 2 pages from the Cremona document.
Shut up. Wait a minute.
That we had never seen.
Wait, stop. Stop right there. Pump the brakes. When you say 2 pages from the Cremona document, are we talking about copies or 2 pages?
Now the Cremona document was probably copied by probably a Freemason in the around 1860. Okay, this is typical for old documents to be copied and recopied because they degrade over time. The Cistercians, who were the monastery of white monks that the Knights Templar were members of, they were part of the Cistercian order. They had rooms in every one of their monasteries where monks all day long, all they did was copy manuscripts.
Sure.
Beautiful illuminated manuscripts.
Sure.
And they would update these, and they would make multiple copies so they would be preserved. And this Cremona document is one of those secret documents that chronicles Templar voyages to America that the world has never seen until now. And it's freaking amazing what's in here.
Okay.
But these 2 pages,
yes,
we just got.
Okay.
And I've spent the last month deciphering them along with Don, and I think we now have it figured out.
Okay, we're going to come back to that in a second. The original Cremona document, I know I've asked you this before, but just for clarification for the audience, does it exist today? Is it at the Vatican? Who's got the original Cremona document?
To be quite frank with you, I think the original Cremona document that was written down in the 12th century is probably degraded and gone, or it's preserved somewhere in a secret archive, most likely the Vatican.
Right.
But the honest answer is I don't know. It could be in a monastery someplace. We know this copy of the Cremona document that Bill Jackson bought in 1971 was in Cremona, Italy for a long time in a monastery there. That's why we call it the Cremona document.
Right. Okay, so let's go back. Okay, so now in December, envelope, Jackson, you guys, you open it, you've been deciphering it and translating it.
Right.
Where are we at? What have you found out?
So let me back up for a sec, because how I got the document is almost as good as what's in the document. And I'm not kidding you, because you got to remember, Don was part of an organization. And when I asked Don to tell people what he used to do for a living, he said, I used to work for an organization that did things with your tax dollars.
Right.
And that's all he would say.
Right.
But I will tell you that what Don did for a living was the dirty work that we never hear about. And those guys did some really, really good patriotic things that our government just doesn't tell us about. And just know this, some of the stuff that our government does I don't necessarily agree with, but a lot of the stuff that they do is really good stuff that does protect American and other countries' people's lives, and we never hear about it. It's the kind of work that it's not for everybody. So that's the world that they dwelled in. And because of that world that they dwelled in, that's how Jackson was able to get access to this document. So anyway, the other thing you have to understand is these guys are really clever at working with puzzles and codes and lock-picking and, secret stuff. And so what happened was Don contacted me. I took a trip with my son to the East Coast on my birthday to go to the Newport Tower to see the illumination, and I gave a lecture that I told people they should watch before they heard our interview tonight because it sets the table for what we're talking about right now. But anyway, on that trip, Don came out there because I wanted him to be there when I gave this lecture, and he was, and it was amazing. When he showed up to my hotel room the night of the lecture, my son and I were sitting in the room, and there's a knock on the door, and it's Don, and he's carrying a box. And he looks at me and he goes, "Happy birthday, Scott." And I said, "Hey, Don, what's this?" And I brought the box to the room, and I opened it up, and it was a wooden box that he had made for me. It was a birthday present. And on the top was this beautiful circle with a hooked X symbol in it, my initials. And then I opened the box, and inside was this cast, statue of a Templar knight, which was cool. And I'm like, "Oh, thanks." And then I looked, and it was felt lined, and he did this all by hand. And I tapped the bottom of the box because I know how this guy operates, right? And it was hollow. And I looked at him, and I said, "There's a secret compartment in here." And he just started laughing. And of course, my son stood up, and he's like, "Well," and Grant's an engineer, right? Boy, he went right to work, and we found the secret the secret compartment. Now, a week earlier, Don had sent me page 2 of these 2 pages. And I called him, and I said, "Where's page 1? He said, "You'll get it." Well, guess what was in that secret compartment? Page 1. Mm-hmm. And I've got a video of us pulling it out. It's fantastic. So, what are these 2 pages? These 2 pages. Now, remember I told you about the map that they used on Oak Island, what I call the Oak Island map? It's part of the Cremona document.
Yeah, you sent it to me.
Yeah, you've seen it. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes,
well, if you look at the northern part of the map, you will see 6 French words. They are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And coordinates of latitude and longitude that intersect where these numbers are. There's dots, and it says these numbers. The only problem is we don't know what those numbers correlate to. These pages, and what it says at the top, written in cursive writing, in the same hand as the guy who drew those maps. And if you look in the upper right-hand corner of that map, you'll see a sigla of 3 letters, the personal sigla of the guy who drew that map, CLY. At the top of these 2 pages is that same CLY. And the heading says, the explanation of the numbers on the 8 maps. Well, we only have 4 maps. You know what that means? There's still 4 out there. And I don't know where they are. Well, anyway, so now what it does, it has numbers on page 1, 1 through 19, and then on the second page, 20 through 24. Then there's a gap, and then 30 and 31. And written in French, all of these are written in block French, are notes with each number. So those 6 numbers on the Nova Scotia map, I know what they stand for. I know what happened there. They're chronicling events that happened on DeSutterly's trip. Okay? Then on 7 and 8, we go to a different map that's in my book that is the Cape Cod map. And then we keep going, and then we hit the Southern Connecticut map. But then we have a series of 6 entries that we don't have maps for. Those have to correlate with the other 2 or 3 or 4 other maps that we don't have. But then the entries 20, 21, 22, 23, they correlate with one of the maps that is the Narragansett Bay map. And then there's one more entry, and we go back, and it correlates to one of the other maps that we do have. But here's what's really, really important. The events that take place during de Sutherly's voyage happened in the late 12th century, between 1177 and 1180. The problem is, throughout the whole story that he tells in his deposition, he never talks about being in the Cape Cod area, and he doesn't talk about Narragansett Bay. So I was confused, and for the last 6 years, I have assumed that those maps correlated to that journey. I just didn't see how they fit.
Right,
okay?
Right.
So
right.
It's a disconnect. But there's an answer to the disconnect, and you're not going to believe what it is. And if you're going into a commercial, this would be a good time to do it. I want to keep people hanging because I'm going to tell you this, Jim. On the back of page 1, there's another map in invisible ink.
Okay, so when we're talking about, we all love treasure maps, right? Right. We all love them. But in as you're piecing this together and you're looking at this, what do you think ultimately that these maps indicate? Is it merely the mapping of the area that they're traveling in, and they need to navigate and remember where they're coming and going from, or is it something else more significant? The position of something, the hiding of something, obviously buried treasure.
All of the above, Jim. All of the above. Remember, the whole story here is about what? They wanted to establish a new Jerusalem. In some cases, they call it a free Templar state, a place where they didn't have to worry about the monarchs of Europe and their corrupt ways, right? They didn't have to worry about the Roman Catholic Church and its persecution and how the two worked in consort with each other, legitimizing each other and promoting the corruption that each would commit against the people. And who suffered from that persecution? For God's sakes, the poster child for persecution by the church and the monarchs of Europe are the Knights Templar Order. They were the ones that were the biggest threat to them. But what they didn't realize, and what we're now just starting to realize, is they had a grand plan for hundreds of years to establish a new sanctuary over here. And so what these records are, that this Cremona document is, and other things that we have yet to share with you, I can't share yet, these are the secret documents that the Templars kept and the Cistercians preserved that tell of that entire mission. And just like you said, what else is preserved in here besides the mapping? Well, of course they mapped the coastlines and the inland areas, and they got to know this land extensively. I mean, they had to know about, where to navigate, where to go, where the resources were, and more importantly, probably than anything, is the people that were here, the indigenous people that were here, that they absolutely interacted with and formed a strategic alliance with. Because there's no way that anybody is going to operate on this continent without the support and the cooperation of the indigenous people. It's just not going to happen. And that is what these records tell us. And it's an amazing story. It's an incredible story. It's the real story about the history of the founding of this nation. And part of what I'm trying to do here, Jim, is educate people with documents, science, and facts about the real history of what happened here. And probably now more than ever, the people of this country need to understand what the origins of this country truly are and were. And so that, I feel, is what this mission is all about. And I'm having so much damn fun, I can't stand it. People actually pay me to do this. It's amazing.
Well, Scott, the only thing that we can come away from, and, we're talking about 1180, right? 12th century, 1180.
Yeah. That
the travel across the Atlantic or around the world was easy. This was something that was not a big deal. I don't see stress here, right? I see. Let's go.
Hold on a sec, Jim. I on one hand, you're right, but on the other hand, you're not. Make no mistake. It was dangerous business, okay? And we see that in these documents. They lost ships, they lost men all the time. I mean, those first three numbers, 1, 2, 3, on these comments here, they talk about a shipwreck. De Sutterly lost one of his ships, and they scuttled it.
But it didn't deter, right? And when they, when they were over in Scotland, right? They're over in the United Kingdom. And they're like, okay, well, you know what? We gotta go over to America. And we're talking about in 1100, where this was something that they jumped on a ship and went and did. They weren't concerned about where they were going to because they knew where they were going to. It wasn't about discovery.
100%.
And that's 100%. My point.
And remember, they had been doing it for thousands of years before that.
That's right.
De Sutterly is going over to recover documents that were brought over here
in the
1,000 years earlier.
That's right.
They had already done this.
That's right.
So this is 1,000 years later that they're making these trips. And again, it was not easy. It was dangerous, and they lost lives. But in a way, the mindset back then was something, akin to if you're on a football team, and you're playing big boy football or rugby or hockey or anything else. I mean, you can go down, right? You can blow out a knee, you can blow out a shoulder, you can get a concussion. This is collateral damage as part of the game. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it's just part of the deal. But for them, part of the deal was they could lose ships, they could lose lives, they could lose everybody. But it was worth it to them, and they understood that. They realized the dangers, but they did it anyway. And it's incredible. It's something that I just don't think people comprehend today, except for the people that serve in our military, right? Because one of the things that could happen when you sign up, you might not come home.
Yeah,
so you
the
might
ultimate
come
sacrifice.
Home with all your limbs, right?
This is Fade to Black. Our guest tonight, Scott Wolter. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. You can become an official Fadernaut. Simple to do. Just go to jimmychurchradio.com. Click on the membership section. You can also gift a membership now over at jimmychurchradio.com. Become a game changer today over in our membership section. Our guest tonight, Scott Wolter. And now, Scott, right before the break, you were teasing about big reveal number 2 when it comes to these 2 pages.
Yes, I did. And, I'm just looking at, I've got printed out copies of a PowerPoint that I put together. It was the way I studied this thing and tried to understand all the comments and everything. And then when I got home from my trip, it was like the 23rd or something, a couple days before Christmas, Don sent me an email, and he said, there's a map on the back of page 1. I said, what are you talking about? And he sent me a photograph, and sure enough, and really this map on the back is the key, is a huge piece to this puzzle of the Cremona document. And I just need to back up and tell you that, there are some other things, other pages that are part of this document that have secret maps on them. And I haven't really said much about them, and I didn't write about them too much. I wrote about one of them in my latest book because it was germane to the story that we tell. But there's a couple of other letters that have secret maps that were brought out with lemon juice and heat. In other words, if you put lemon juice on them, the ink that they use reacted with the lemon juice and would be brought out, and then you would be able to fixate it and get it to stay for a while with like a hairdryer or something, right? Mm-hmm. Well, unfortunately, one of these maps, they did this with. Now, this was back in the 70s, and they were taking pictures, and when the letters would come out and the lines would come out on this map, they took pictures. But the problem was they had the heater too close, and it ignited, and the thing caught fire and burned up. So that one's gone, but we do have the photographs, and one of the pictures shows it literally on fire. I mean, it's unbelievable, and I'm like, no! But it happened like almost 50 years ago. It's back in the early 70s. But in any case, there are other ways of creating invisible maps, if you will. And the one that is on this particular page didn't react to the lemon juice and heat, but it did react to black light. So Don's picture was of the black light image of what was on the back side. And what I could see were Theban characters and a map of a place, and I can't tell you the place.
Oh, yeah, you can. Where is it?
I can't. I love you. I love you.
Where is it?
And you're really good at getting stuff out of me, but I'm going to stand firm. I got to draw the line with you this time,
I'm
brother.
not asking.
I love you to death, but I can't do it.
I know. I'm not asking for Google Earth coordinates so we can swarm the site. But where is it?
It's in North America on the East Coast. That I will tell you.
So
okay?
It could be anywhere from Florida to Maine. That's okay. But are we talking about the northern East Coast? It must be northern. It's not southern.
Look at you, man. We're playing. You're going to do 20 questions on me. You're going to try to nail this down.
Well,
I may have been born at May.
Okay, so we know it's in the Northeast.
It is in the Northeast. I'll tell you that. Okay.
Okay.
Now, but let me just tell you what it says.
Okay.
And let me tell you what the revelation is. Okay.
But is it on the coast or is it inland?
Well, an island isn't on.
Oh, it's an island in the Northeast. That? Okay.
Did I say that?
Yeah, you did. Okay, so it's an island, but it's not Oak Island, of course.
No. Hell no.
Okay.
God, don't go there.
Okay.
Anyway, no, absolutely not. No, we're done talking about that. Now, let's talk about the first two lines that are written in Theban script. And I actually kind of know the Theban alphabet pretty good by now. And all of these are a one-to-one letter substitution. So I did my best with this picture, but I couldn't do it as well. Don has the actual document. I have not seen this back side of the page yet. I've seen the front page, but we didn't know about the map until after he went back home.
Right.
So I never saw it. I didn't even look at it. I didn't even think there would be something on the back side.
Well, when you look at the...
We won't make that mistake again.
Sure. And when you look at the map, does it feel accurate to you?
Yep.
It feels accurate, so it's not
I look at this map, I know exactly where this is.
So it's not like Long Island, where it's not really an island. We're talking about an island that is an actual island.
Long Island technically is an island. I mean, technically it is, but it's a huge tract of land. No, it's not that big.
So it's not Long Island.
No.
Exactly. So it's got to be a
and
little.
I'm not saying, having said that, it doesn't mean it couldn't be one of the islands on the northern end of Long Island, because there's a bunch of islands up there.
Right. So we know it's north of Long Island then. Okay.
We do?
Yeah, we do. We're getting close. Okay. We're getting close. We're zeroing.
Stop it now. Hey.
Okay.
So, you
fair
want to
enough.
know what it says? Or you want to screw around some more?
I actually do want to know what it says.
Okay, here we go. You ready?
Yes.
So the first two lines say this: the place where we deposit the treasure of the poor knights of Christ.
Say that again?
The place where we deposit the treasure of the poor knights of Christ.
Okay.
Now, what's interesting about this is apparently what they called themselves. They didn't call themselves the Templars.
Right.
Now, in other documents, they call themselves the Templary. But in this case, they call them, it's almost like a formal name, Poor Knights of Christ. That in itself is really a big deal.
Well, okay. Can we stop there for a second?
Yeah.
There are, when we look at that style of titling, it reminds me of, what was going on in Malta or Portugal or even India, right? Different branches of the Knights Templar around the world. Is that what we're dealing with?
Well, I think so. I think that's a really good point that you make, that, depending on where you were in Europe or in the Mediterranean region,
right?
Factions of what are the same order called themselves something slightly different. Like in Portugal, they were the Order of Christ.
That's right.
Right?
Right.
And so they had slightly different ways that, things that they would call themselves. And I really haven't looked into that in any detail. Now, let me just back up for just a second so you understand, because some people are going, it says the place where they deposit the treasure. The Theban translated into French, and then it was translated into English. So this would be a modern vernacular of the French that was probably 1850s, 1860s. Okay, so for the academics out there that are turning their nose up to this, no, this isn't one-to-one into English. This is into 19th century French and then into modern English, okay? So just so everybody understands, this is what it says after we do all those translations. Make sense?
It does. It does. And so where are you going with this now? I'm talking about the
more,
Knights.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's get to that. But the Knights of Christ.
Now, don't get mad at me. There's two more things that are on this back side of secret information. Besides the map, I can't tell you about. There is also some information on the bottom that gives us location information. Obviously, I can't tell you that. But there's something else on here that is probably the most important thing that helps put all of this into context finally for me. And you'll understand what I'm talking about when I tell you. Remember I said we know we have 4 maps, apparently of 8, and we don't have 4 others. 2 of the 4 maps that we have, absolutely, and the comments that are on these 2 pages are directly related to the voyage of Ralph de Sutterley and what he did here at the temple, and then, how he got out of here. No question about it. The other 2 maps don't correlate at all with that story. He doesn't go anywhere near those places. He doesn't talk about them. What the hell are they doing here? That was my question. So for a long time, I assumed, because the date on the one map is 1179, that those other 2 maps must correlate with the other 2, right? So they all have to be from that time period. Well, guess what? You know what the date is on this secret map here? Do you know how to do Roman numbers?
Yep.
Okay, so you know what, Jim? Every time you and I get together, you're always asking me the questions. Now I'm going to put one to you. You're going to do the work here for us, okay?
Okay, I'll
try.
Write
this down, and you tell me the year, okay?
Okay.
You ready?
Yep.
M, C, 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 L, X, V, 1, 1, 1. What year is that?
Okay, let me see if I can figure this out. I'm going to guess and say 1968.
No. You're off by 600 years.
Okay.
M is 1,000.
MCM.
C is 100.
Right.
L is 50.
I
X
thought
is
you said
10.
MCMLXV111.
No, I said MCCC. LX.
Oh, MCCLX.
Okay, sorry about that.
Okay, hold on for a second. So it's MCCCLX V111. 111. Okay. Okay, I am going to say 111's got to be an 8. 1368.
Boom, you got it. Now, what does that mean? That is not anywhere near 1179. That's almost 2 centuries later, right?
Predates Columbus by 50 years.
It does. Right. But there's more that I haven't told you about. I have one more big reveal. Are you ready? You're getting so much stuff. Should we save this for the next show?
Nope.
What time is it?
I know. Okay.
If you were here, I'd punch me.
But
no, I'd let you punch me. Here we go. All right, here we go. So let's go back to that Narragansett Bay map. Do you remember the last episode that we did this year? Episode 10, Tracking the Templars.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
And we went up to Newfoundland and we found that haystack inscription that had the triple barred cross.
That's right.
Then we went to Scotland and we went into Weems Caves and we found another triple barred cross, the exact same triple barred cross. And then we went to Newport, Rhode Island, and we found that In Hoc Signo Vinci stone.
Mm-hmm.
First time we revealed that on television.
That's right.
The 2-to-1 ratio, right? The block Latin that said In Hoc, which happens to be the battle cry of the Knights Templar.
That's right.
Okay. Do you have a copy of my book handy?
Not here.
Okay. Well, when you go home, I want you to look at the Narragansett Bay map. And there's 2 horizontal lines at the southern part of the map. And on it, it says Vingt un, Vingt deux, Vingt trois. 20, 21, 22, and 23. 20, the comment in the new page that we just got says, the storm pushes the boat to land among many islands. This is dangerous. Again, this is English translated from French, okay? 1800s era French. This is the translation. Don and I each did our own translations, and we pulled them together, and this is what we got, okay? That's 20, and that's, if you look at this map, there's small islands all through Narragansett Bay. 21, that point right there. You'll see it on the map. It says shoals here, 3 fathoms. You know where that dot is? Exactly where on that shore is the In Hoc Signo Vinci stone.
Really?
I crap you not. I'm telling you right now. And guess what? I went online the other day and I looked at the isobars of depth right off the coast there. And you know what the first isobar is? 17.7 feet. You know what that is? 3 fathoms.
What is the closest city to that shoal?
Newport, Rhode Island.
Newport. So the string of is it Gardiner's Island?
No, it's on Aqueduct Island. It's on the Big Island.
No,
right?
I'm talking about the secret map.
Oh, I can neither confirm nor deny.
So it's, because you have Robbins Island. Tap once if it's yes. Tap 2 if it's no. Robbins Island.
Stop it.
You have
Stop it.
You have
Quit it.
Warner Islands. You have Squash Island.
I can't give it up, Jim. Come on. I mean, come on. Would you give it up?
Ah, man. This is fun, though. It's fun. I think it's Gardiner's Island.
I haven't gotten to the best one yet.
I think it's Gardiner's Island. Okay, so what about 22 and 23?
Okay, 22. And 22 is a sacred number. Okay? Now just indulge me for a second, if you will, because 22 is such an important entry. And think about it in context with the date that we just came up with, okay? I will just say this. What this is about, where this dot is for 22, is exactly where the Newport Tower is, okay? So when I saw this prior to a few days ago when I got this final translation, when Don and I settled on the translation,
right.
The problem that I've had is that dot being where the Newport Tower is doesn't make any sense in the Cremona document because it's the end of the 12th century. And for 15 years now, I've been saying, for good reason, that the tower was probably built around 1400. This is a problem. This map is a problem because it means I'm wrong by over 200 years. But guess what?
What?
I was wrong. Because I assumed that this map was contemporaneous with the other maps, and it's not.
Well, okay.
Clearly, it's related to the 1368 date, okay? Now, here's where it's going to get really fun. Now, listen to this.
Okay.
You ready?
Well, I want to go back to the Newport Tower. I want to go back
That's
to
what
20.
I'm doing.
Okay.
That's what I'm doing.
Okay, good.
What do you want to say about the tower? Go ahead.
No, when you say that 22 marks the exact spot of the Newport Tower, now we're going into fantastic land, fantastical, right? The coincidence side of this.
No, this is like orgasmatron land.
Right, exactly.
As it gets, and there's nothing better.
That's right.
For me, when I read this, I was almost weeping. Seriously. So just sit back and enjoy this because it's so good. Ready?
Yep.
Okay. The observatory is built here. The hut of the day observers is on the right, and the night observers on the left. The field of measurements surrounded by a stone wall separated them from numerous slabs and wooden poles. Henry remains here to oversee the construction.
Shut up. Shut up.
I'm not going to shut up. That's what it says, man. Okay, so you know what's going on, right?
Well,
they're laying out the alignments.
They're laying out the alignments, and they're also naming names.
Yes,
right?
They are.
And
it's
so,
spelled Henri.
Okay, now when we get so just for grins, I'm not going to say it out loud. Who is Henry?
I don't know. Here's the problem. Okay, so here's the reality. Okay,
could it be a Sinclair?
This has to be. Well, it does.
Okay.
And there's reasons why I'm saying that I really can't go into right now because it'll reveal too much. But it does relate to that 1368 date, which is perfect for Team Scott.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
I borrowed that line from We're the Millers. Remember at the end? The guy that sent Jason Sudeikis on the drug mission, and he shows up he goes, oh, this is a big win for Team Brad.
Yes.
Anyway, I digress. Okay.
That's actually a funny scene.
It was a funny scene.
It's a funny scene. That's a funny scene.
But anyway, the point is that 1368 is perfect for another reason. The Kensington Runestone, what's the date on that, Jim?
Okay, wait a minute. Now, okay, the critics out there at this point, when things are lining up like they are going to go, oh, come on. Scott, now you're reaching.
No, I'm not reaching, dude. The data's right here. You don't like it, tough off.
Right.
I don't want to hear anything from them unless they have something to contribute. If you don't like it, then shut your mouth.
That's
I've been
right.
listening to you guys for 20 years. You got nothing to offer. The data's the data. The results are the results. And I'm sorry if I'm getting pissed off, but I've dealt with those you-know-whats for a long time. And the bottom line is look, you want to interpret this a different way, you go right ahead. But the data is the data. What I read to you is what it is.
Right.
The map is the map, and I'm sorry if you don't like it, but that's the way it is.
That's right.
What can I tell you?
Well, see, this is the thing, and what is most important here, Scott, when somebody says, give me the evidence, Whatever, and then you have corresponding dates. You have things that line up. You have names. You have the maps. You have the documents. You have everything that only points to what you have. Physical structures. You have the megalithic carvings in stone, right? And I'm talking about what's going on.
What the hell more do you want?
That's right.
You just laid it all out there. And what's beautiful about this is it's all consistent. It's all tying together now. Even some of the assumptions I made, I was proven wrong by new information that came in, and guess what? Freaking stuff lines up beautifully. And you know what? What do you want from me? and here's the thing that I've learned, because I've done forensics for a long time. That's all I've done. Every day for 35 years. And you know what, Jim? I'm pretty good at it, okay? Everything must line up. It has to line up if it's true. And you know what? I'll be damned. That's exactly what's happening. And it's beautiful. And it's confirming the work we've done in the past. Look, the runestone was a done deal a long time ago, and now it comes into play, and it's important. And I'll tell you why. Because remember that alignment that we had in the first documentary we ever did back in 2009, Holy Grail in America?
Right.
And I had just discovered that long-range alignment from the Newport Tower to the Kensington Runestone. And the question that I asked in my new book, which came first? Was the runestone planted, and then somehow they got word to the Newport Tower guys, and they made the alignment? Or the tower guys built it, and then they followed the alignment, and they put the stone where they had to? I think we now know what happened. The dates tell us. 1362, 1368. That's only 6 years later. 6 years! How long would it take for one or two guys who plotted the coordinates of where they put the Kensington Runestone to travel with their native indigenous brothers back to the East Coast, to the settlement that they must have known was there, and said, hey, guess what? We put the land claim right here. And they incorporated those alignments into the tower, and boom, it lines up. You can't make it up. The data all fits. It's a done deal, baby. I'm going to write about it in the next book. You heard it here first on Fade to Black.
We're not done. Let's take a break right here. Scott Wolter. That's what I'm talking about, the passion. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. You can follow Scott at Real Scott Wolter right there on Twitter. We'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Want to remind everybody, June 26th and 27th, 2020, we're heading over to Europe. We're going to Manchester, United Kingdom for the Awakening Conference. Just go to awakeningufo.com. The links are at Jimmy Church Radio. Now, Scott, we've got two over-unders going with you tonight. And the first one is I can't tell you it's a secret. The over and under was you were going to say it 4 times. We got to 3. So, and the other over-under is Nantucket. And the good money is Nantucket Island right now.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, so it's not Nantucket. Okay, so we can take Nantucket off the list.
Stop guessing. Don't do that. Don't guess it. You know, look.
Do you know how many islands? You know how many islands there are in the East Coast? There's 10,000
a lot more islands on the East Coast. My God, there's a whole bunch of them.
Yes.
And, you know, don't forget there are barrier islands down in the south, and it's, anyway, so yeah. I digress. Well, what do you think about that big reveal, and what do you think about the Kensington?
Okay, so...
I love this alignment. I love this thesis. It makes sense, and there's other reasons why it makes sense, and I know this is terrible to do this to you because I got to get to number 4. I might as well just get it done now.
Okay.
But there are some other things, there's other information we have that we have not revealed, and it supports this stuff.
Okay, did we get to 23?
Oh, good question. No, we did not.
Okay.
23 is not as exciting, but there's a dot on the west side of Aqueduct, and it says freshwater stream here, deep water passage in the canal, and it turns out the isobar depths over on the other side of the island are very deep. So, but you know, you got to think about it in context of that time. I mean, these guys are sailors, right? This is important information.
Sure.
That's what they would want to know.
Absolutely.
And, you know, in context, when you look at it, it makes sense. What they would be interested in is the information that we have on here.
Now, as we get to number 4, and this conversation is going to evolve, but one of the things that has to come into play here is what the indigenous cultures actually know today, and that is also going to be some of the correlation, right? Some of the vetting as you connect the dots, and you are trying to get the connections and verifications. The indigenous cultures are going to come into play, right?
No question about it. In fact, there is one other thing that I would like to tell you about that is that is in that vein. And we had something this past weekend.
Okay, let's actually
go ahead.
Let's circle back. Okay, let's come back to that. I want to let's get to number 4.
Okay, what's number 4?
The fourth reveal.
Oh, I thought you meant I was going to say I can't tell you about it for the 4th time. Okay, well, the fourth reveal. Well, there is one more really interesting thing on this Narragansett Bay map. There is a number 30 on here, and it's which is interesting because where is 24 to 29? I have no idea. It wasn't on either one of those two sheets, so maybe we'll find it somewhere. It'll show up down the road. But number 30 says, we have finished the scout. The two sides come together at the treasure field. We travel to the southwest. Now, that point of intersection where number 30 is way north of Narragansett Bay, probably another 10 miles, 15 miles north of the very northern end of the bay. And to the southwest, when you look at the map, there's a partial circle drawn with that intersection at 30 there, the intersection point. But there's a dot on the southwest quadrant of the circle with a line that goes to the southwest. And on that line, it says, La Place, La Treasure. The place of the treasure. And there's a dot at a spot. So I'm assuming that's where they put the treasure. Now, what's really, 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 really interesting is that spot today, to this very day. Do you know what's there?
I'm looking.
Okay, I'll tell you where it is. Cumberland. Google it.
I'm there.
Okay. There's a monastery there.
I just looked at a picture of it. That's
It's
crazy.
called a Cistercian monastery.
Right.
To this day. What are the odds? And that also is the place where there is a Cumberlandite mine. Cumberlandite is the state stone of Rhode Island. And you might remember on another episode of our show, I don't remember what season it was, but we were doing something on the Newport Tower, and we discovered that there was a large piece of Cumberlandite stone in the south column of the Newport Tower. That stone is highly magnetic. It contains up to 45% magnetite. A magnet will just bing attach right to it. That is where that spot is, that mine where they used to mine it, and they would smelt it for the iron. And that's where that Cistercian monastery is to this day. That is not a coincidence, my friend.
I'm looking at it here, and what's interesting also for me is that the access not only to Cumberland, and there's a lake next to the monastery there, but the access inland through rivers and tributaries that are right off of the where Pawtucket is. And it continues.
That's a really, really good point you're making, because the rivers and the lakes and the bays and the oceans, those were the highways and roads that these guys traveled. That's a great point.
Yep. Very interesting.
So, now I don't have any illusion that there's anything there today, because if there's one thing that the Templars were pretty good about, is they and I can tell you this absolutely for certain, they put treasures all over the place, because we have treasure maps, and I have not revealed any of those yet, but I will, hopefully on a TV show someday. This is the content that I want to do on television. I love doing America on Earth, don't get me wrong, but if I had my druthers, I would do this every episode, and we would find stuff. And we probably at some point would find a treasure. Did they recover them all? I don't know. I know they recovered a lot of them. They probably recovered this one, and I'm sure they got most of them. But I bet with the sheer number that we know about, that there's got to be one or two still out there.
Now,
but you know something, Jim? You know what would be just as good?
What's that?
Would be an amazing treasure all in itself. Is if we went to one of these treasure sites and we found a hole that had been filled in.
Well, anything like that. Yeah, I totally agree. Anything like that. And let's back up for a second. And
go ahead.
The record keeping of this and the knowledge of these trips has to be documented by the Vatican. The Vatican had to know what was going on between, and especially at that time period, right?
I disagree.
Why?
I think the one group that they did not want to know was the Vatican.
But that doesn't. What I'm saying is that the Vatican had the knowledge of this stuff, not only getting to North America. And that something was spirited away in the 1st century BC, something that important, especially documents relating directly back to Jesus and Mary.
Well, you know what? They were aware of it. They were aware. They have the document. In this, according to a letter I received from an anonymous source, the Vatican had a copy of the marriage document in 220 AD. In the 3rd century, they got a copy of it. So they've known that it was out there. But there were other copies that were out there that they probably went out of their way to try to round up. But apparently this one on Hunter Mountain, they never got. So it was recovered. It was taken there in the 1st century. Who brought them there? I don't know. We don't know that story. But somehow they got there, and they were there for 1,000 years. And then they were recovered by the Templars, and they were hidden again. And but the whole time, the Vatican was aware of the document because they had a copy of it, but they didn't know that it was over here.
What does have you been able to talk to anybody directly at the Vatican about the Cremona document?
No, I have not. And you know what? They're going to find out. And Bill Jackson's dead, and the parts of the I will tell you this: the parts of the document that we know he pulled out, like these 2 pages, and like a couple of treasure maps that we haven't shown anybody yet. That was and the site and the page that had the cipher phrase you need to decode. Excuse me, the whole thing. He pulled that stuff out. And in fact, the first time I read the translated document that Bill Jackson wrote, he said the first page was missing. Baloney, he had it. He wanted people to think it was missing because he didn't want to give it to the Vatican. And without that, you can't decode it.
Right.
He didn't give them the treasure maps. He didn't give them these notes that go with the maps. Apparently, they got the maps. They got a lot of other stuff. They got a list of the stuff that De Suddenly recovered. But were they able to translate it? I assume they eventually did figure it out. But I think what Jackson did, and this is what Don said, was that the reason he disseminated these key pieces to his guys in the agency is if Paul Marcinkus in the Vatican ever came back and said, hey, dude, you're missing a few pages here, pony up, he could have said, well, I don't have them here, but I know how to get them. And, oh, by the way, it's going to cost you $10,000. I really like this Bill Jackson guy. I wish I could have known him. And in the story of his adventure with this, in many ways parallels my own journey and how, academia was and other people are just so against this. And, they attack everything you do because for some reason they just don't want the truth to come out. And for the life of me, I don't know why. Now, I can understand why the Vatican and the church wants to hide this stuff. I mean, they've been lying to us for, 1,700 years since the Council of Nicaea. But, some of these other groups that are attacking people in academia, they're not on their side. What is the problem? Well, I think we know what some of the problems are, but it's gotten to the point now where it's like, really, guys? Do you think anybody is buying your BS anymore? Just stop already and get on board. If you got to rewrite your papers, rewrite them.
Well,
sorry.
And with the coastline up and down the East Coast, and I'm talking about all the way to you can go into the Bahamas and Puerto Rico, but certainly the coastline of the United States from Florida all the way up to Maine and beyond is occupied by cultures that have been here for thousands of years, and they are looking out to sea. They're living on the coast. That's where they live. They know everything that is happening on those coasts. And if somebody came,
you bet.
That's right. So if there was, and it appears to be the case, that if there was action going on anywhere, they knew about it, and they possessed that knowledge all the way to the Kensington runestone and land grabs that are going on 1,000 miles to the west. The indigenous cultures knew and assisted and had to have been involved with anything that was going on here.
100%. You're 100% right. You are. And you know what, that if I could just interject for a sec, that brings me to what happened this Saturday. Just 4 days ago, we had what we called the Kensington Runestone Summit. And this was a Masonic event at the Scottish Rite Temple in Minneapolis, where I took my Scottish Rite degrees, and I now participate in the Scottish Rite degrees for the new candidates. But we had a summit, and there was 30 guys, and most of these guys, well, all of these guys, are in the leadership positions of the York Rite bodies, and they're all Knights Templar. And we had myself, we had another a brother who actually found something that I missed in the cryptic code of one of the degrees that is part of my new book that details the Kensington Runestone inscription numbers in the degree. But then we also had an indigenous brother, a guy by the name of Taylor Keene, who is a Harvard graduate with an MBA. He's a college professor. He's a York Rite and Scottish Rite Mason. He's also a Rosicrucian. But more importantly, he's also a Medewan. He is part of the Native American secret society of the Meday. They are the ones that interacted with the Templars. They are the ones that shared rituals together. And Brother Taylor was there, and he gave a lecture about his his ancestors, about the depth of knowledge that they had that are incorporated into the earthworks that they built going back thousands of years, the mathematics, the geometry, the algebra, the geometry, the sophistication level and knowledge that these indigenous people, most people just have no idea. And so when they interacted with these Templars who had the same knowledge, that shared the same degrees, they didn't just get along and trade trinkets. They interacted at a level that was so profound and so deep, they literally became blood brothers. That is why the Templars were so successful on this continent. That is why they were able to do all this stuff that I claim that archaeologists' heads just explode because they know nothing about it. And it's because they won't even get into the batter's box, let alone to first base. But now what's happening is the indigenous people are starting to step up and say, it's time to share what we know. And Brother Taylor was the first one to come there, and everybody was just transfixed by what he had to say. And then I finished it off, and I laid out some of this stuff. I laid out some other stuff I can't tell you about yet. And I told those guys, I said, guys, this is our history. This is the knowledge that was passed on to our founding fathers. They said nothing about it. They just finished the job that these Templars started with that land claim in 1362. And that's why I say now, and I'm going to say in Los Angeles, that the founding of this country did not start in 1776. It started in 1362. And now we can add 1368 to that chronologic dates. But that's what happened. And you know what? You can argue with me all you want, and all those skeptics and all those deniers and haters can try to attack this. Good luck trying to attack the indigenous people when they speak up and say, yes, it happened.
Is there, do you anticipate a point where, as this is discussed in a public forum, certainly like we are doing now, right, where somebody comes forward from a tribe and says, hey, I was given this. This was handed down from generation to generation, and here is...
Man, you're hitting, yes. That is exactly what we're hoping for. And you know what, Jim? It's going to happen because I know that stuff is out there. I've been told that stuff is out there, but you have to understand something. Those people within these indigenous societies that have been given, they've been entrusted with these artifacts. Mm-hmm. This is deep, profound stuff. They're not just going to lay it out to anybody. You have got to prove yourself worthy before they're even going to think about it. And one of the things I think that would go a long way to that, and this is what I know they're waiting for, somebody in authority in this country and up in Canada, but I think they've already done it. It's our turn now. We have got to acknowledge the atrocities of the past for the way these people were treated, and somebody needs to sincerely apologize. And it doesn't mean you got to write a check, right? They just want someone to say, hey, this happened. We're sorry. Let's move forward. And I think it's as simple as that. And once that happens, I think we'll be amazed at what they know. I'm already amazed, and I know there's more to come, but I think that's what it'll take.
Well, I envision something as simple as this, because things were traded. We're not talking about dollar bills, obviously, back then, but things were traded, and sure. And that's the way that things were done. There was a very fair barter system that was going on, and I can imagine something like it could be an exotic sword or something like that. It could be a sword, right? But it could be clothing. It could be boots. It could be books. It could be
carved stone.
It could be anything that was traded and exchanged and saved, and handed down from family to family. And this is the other point that I think is very, very significant. The generations that we're talking about here, it's not that great of a time. It's not that extended. If you just go with 100-year increments, now we're talking about 7, 8 hard generations ago. If you go to parent-child generations, then we're talking about 10, 12 generations ago. That's not much.
It really isn't. And Jim, sort of coming full circle with this thing. As far as the indigenous people go, the ones that I've talked to, the Templars were they were just like yesterday. There were people coming here along, time and time and time again, going back hundreds and thousands of years, and they know about that. The Templars were just the last ones to come before the colonists came. So this is like yesterday to them, for their story keepers and the ones that are entrusted with preserving the stories. They know these guys well. So keep that in mind, because there's all kinds of people. We've talked about this before. These are the Johnny-come-latelys in one respect, because there were many that came before them, and they know all about them.
If something like that surfaced, I mean, talk about the Holy Grail, right? If something like that actually surfaced, right, a 12th century sword with that not only is dateable, but with a family name on it, something absolutely nutty. If that surfaced, what
will happen is people will say, "Oh well, they
that's right.
They didn't have that." They'll find a way to complain, right?
It's never enough. It's never enough.
It's never enough. So you're never going to please them. And look, I gave up trying to please academics and skeptics. There's nothing wrong with somebody asking questions, but on the other hand, you know what? You have to come up with an alternate theory too, and you have to have evidence to support your theory. And just saying that it's a hoax isn't good enough. Anybody can say that, right?
Can you do me a favor? Is Jan right there?
She is.
Yeah, ask Jan if you can stay up late and do one more segment of overtime. Get her permission.
Hold on one sec. Hey, Jan, Jim has a question.
Oh, man.
Jim, here she is.
Hey, Jan, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Jim?
I'm doing great, Jan. Can I keep your husband for one more segment?
Sure.
That's what I'm talking about. See, we know who the boss is, Jan. I just had to go straight to the source. We're going to take a break.
Like she's going to say no to you.
Well, let's take our break right here.
You can.
Hey, Jan, say "Go Beckley Teppy" for me. Just say it.
Go Beckley Teppy.
That's what I'm talking about. We'll be right back. This is Fade to Black. Right. We'll be right back. It's Fade to Black. We're going to go into some overtime with Scott Wolter on the Game Changer Network and KGRA, The Planet. Stay right there. Welcome back. Fade to Black. Doing a little overtime. We got permission from Jan with Scott Wolter. He's coming out to Los Angeles February 7th through the 10th to the Conscious Life Expo. And very excited about that. And Scott, once again, I haven't introduced you at a conference for 5 years. Can you believe that? Is that right?
Is it that long? 4 or 5. I think you might be right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably 3-4 years. I mean,
I was just sitting here thinking
that's
about
a long time. Boy, time goes by, doesn't it?
Well, we talk so much, and it's amazing how the time blows by. And jumping in overtime, I want to kind of hit you with this. But myself personally, and of course yourself, is that I feel the frustration when it comes to academia, historians, historical documents, history classes, what is presented out there as fact, and it borders on dogma in that you're hit with this over and over again, that you may not believe it, but you're tired of the beatdown and you accept it as truth. And I want to give you an example of that. I have held back on this for many years, this one fact, and I stumbled upon it, and I thought to myself, wait a minute, I have never heard this. In all of the documentaries that I have seen for decades on the Great Pyramid and on Giza, right? And over and over again, and great researchers out there like John Anthony West and Robert Schoch and Robert Bauval and Graham Hancock, and it just goes on and on.
Right.
Brian Forrester. Well, is this that the Great Pyramid, I'm not going to go into the long version of this. I'm going to present you with the short version, which is the Great Pyramid, documented, and we have been told over and over again, was built over a 20-year period with 2.5 million limestone blocks, blah, 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 right? Over and over again. And that it was built between 2580 BC and 2560 BC, that 20-year period. Now, as unbelievable as that is for us to digest, that something that huge and that big was built and those blocks were cut and placed every 2.5 minutes for 20 years, is a crazy thing. But we've just accepted the beatdown. But what they don't tell you is that the middle pyramid, there's three there, that the middle pyramid, which is just as big, the same 2.5 million blocks, it's 455 feet tall, was built at the exact same time. They didn't build one pyramid in 20 years. They built two. They don't tell you that because they can't. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Of course I do it, because what it'll do is it'll destroy their own narrative.
That's right. It completely breaks it down. We have a hard enough time digesting and believing the 20-year pill that is the Great Pyramid. But now if it was revealed and talked about that there was two built at the same time, now it's not 40,000 workers, it's 80,000. And when you think about this, 80,000 people committed to building two pyramids over 20 years. The population of Egypt at 2580 BC was between 500,000 and 750,000 people in the entire country. So what that would suggest is that 20% of the entire population was tied up for 20 years building two pyramids. Impossible. And not only is it 20% of the population, but it would strongly suggest that every adult male in the country
that was their job.
That was every single one of them. And it would destroy everything. So therefore, it's not talked about. And that's the frustration. And that's just one example of what are thousands of lost history situations that they can't talk about. They cannot. And they won't.
Oh, and to say nothing of the fact that if you've got, I mean, let's use the example of the Knights Templar, right? For each Templar Knight, within an order, they estimate that they had anywhere from 15 to 20 support brothers, lay brothers that would take care of the horses, would grow food, would be involved in the daily work of upkeeping everything that was necessary for a knight, to make swords and the clothing and the chainmail and all this stuff. They estimated anywhere from 15 to 20 lay brothers that would support their activities, okay? So if you've got these people building the pyramids in Giza, they got to eat, they got to sleep, they have to have normal lives. Some of them might have even been married and had children. And, it would take a village. A village, just metaphorically, but I mean, in reality, it would take how many times the number of people that were doing the work to support that effort. So it doesn't make any sense. But all of that, is really thrown out the window already, because the work of guys like Robert Schoch, who are pushing back the construction of the pyramids and certainly the Sphinx, which many Egyptologists say is contemporaneous with the pyramids, back to the Younger Dryas period, 10, 12, 13,000 years ago. Those pyramids aren't 20 whatever BC. They're 2 and 3 times older than that. So how many people did you have back then? Was it more or was it less?
Right.
Oh, this whole thing, this point you're trying to make, I think is even worse than the example you gave. It's more impossible to make that argument and sustain it. It's just not tenable, period.
And the only way to start to accept, if you are going to buy these kinds of narratives, that there was 100,000 people that built the pyramids, it didn't happen then. There had to have been a culture that was not only advanced, but populated and organized, right? Where they had agriculture, they had organization, they had a government, they probably had a religion, and they were able to do those things that were needed. And I'm talking about the engineering, the quarrying, and this is before the Iron Age. Right. This is without steel. This was allegedly without the wheel. That they did this with stone tools, maybe copper chisels.
I don't believe they didn't have the wheel. I don't believe that. That's right. Just me.
That's right. To do this kind of work, we need to start to accept things that are outside of the box. That just maybe this other stuff was going on, and there was another culture there that was involved that did this, because the population and the numbers and the timetable and the technology that you are presenting to us just doesn't work. It doesn't work. I'm waiting.
Oh, you cut out for a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said it just doesn't. It just doesn't work.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't work, and it'll never work. So, the horse is dead. Get off, and let's try something different. That's what I have to say, and maybe it's a little bit harsh, but I'm sorry, Jim. If the data doesn't fit, then you have to try something else. And that's not the right answer. And
the other point is something that you have been looking at and following in your research is a transoceanic conversation. That's where, when we look at history, and not only archaeology, but anthropology and the technology and the organization of different societies and cultures, if we go with the orthodox views on this, that the transoceanic answers didn't happen until much later, that everything was done by the shoreline in the Mediterranean, right? And
no. You know something, Jim? In the Cremona document, we have a page that shows a picture of Amenhotep's, I believe it's Amenhotep. You might have to hold off on that. I'll double check. But it's an obelisk that was in Egypt and Luxor. And the top of that obelisk, it shows the pyramidion at the top was hollow. It came off and it was hollow. And inside of it were maps of the world. And this is going back 3000 BP. Now, that particular obelisk was taken down and brought to Europe. And you know where it is now?
Germany.
No.
Rome.
Paris, France.
France. And
now, if you want to just Google real quick.
But hold on.
The pyramid in Paris, France.
Hold on, Scott. Each one of the cities that I just named has like a 200-ton obelisk in it that came from Egypt, right?
Egypt, right. And we have one in Central Park.
There's one in Central Park, which is mind-bogglingly blowing mind craziness when you see it. But
it is so freaking cool. We did it. We've done 2 episodes where we use that as as for scenes that we shot in the episode. But if you don't mind, Google that obelisk in Paris.
Okay.
And just pull up a picture of it.
I looked at it 2 days ago in a documentary, and I watched a documentary about that obelisk.
Okay.
I literally.
The top of that obelisk was stolen, like 300 BC.
And okay,
Here,
so
look at the picture. What is the top?
I'm looking at it now. Hang on. Different.
It's gold.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because the top is gone.
Now, see,
in the Cremona document, it says it was stolen because there were maps of the entire world.
Now that's very interesting.
That were inside, and that was stolen in 300 BC. And it just turns out that obelisk today doesn't have a top; it's got a gold top. Isn't that interesting?
And this is the thing, that obelisk in Paris, when I'm watching this documentary the other day, and I'm watching people standing next to it walk, you don't get the size of it. You don't get the sense of it. It's 8 stories tall. One piece of red granite.
Of granite.
That's
yes.
right. Now, back to my point. A transoceanic culture had to exist with boats big enough to put that on it and not sink. Right? That's hard enough to do today, right? That is something that big and not break it. The ship was big enough not to flex. And that's,
it obviously made the trip because there it is, right?
That's right. That's right. And
it's incredible. And so, getting back to your whole point about these, this academic narrative that they want us to try to, they keep shoving down our throats. It's like, where's the pushback? I mean, it seems to me like there's relatively few people that are fighting back. But I've also talked to people that say that position that they've held on to for so long is slowly crumbling, and it isn't tenable, and it is going to go away. And things like these documents that are coming out that are proving that it's just silly to hold on to that, and it's time to let go, And I hope it happens in my lifetime because it stifles progress. It demoralizes people, and it's just wrong. Enough, done.
And so, what is it that we need? And that's what I was talking about with your research, and certainly bringing up the Paris obelisk is something that can be used as evidence. But for you, what is the best example that these transoceanic opportunities were happening with regularity and with ease?
Well, if you want to go back to what was probably some of the earlier stuff, I would say the copper culture. And, I've had arguments with scholars that say, well, there's no evidence that there were people coming here to mine copper. And I go, really? Well, what about the tens of thousands of copper mines that we got holes in the ground here in northern Minnesota, Isle Royal, in the UP of Michigan, and other parts of northern Canada that can be dated back as far as 6,000 to 8,000 years ago. Somebody was digging up there, and the indigenous people say that wasn't us. We didn't do that. And remember, after the glaciers melted back, right? There was native copper just laying on the ground all over the place up in our country here in the Great Lakes region, and down into greater Minnesota. My God, I've got an 85-pound piece downstairs that I got in a collection of agates that I bought from a guy last year This is an 85-pound piece of copper that was found down here southwest of the Twin Cities in Savage, Minnesota. Not in Savage, in Carver, Minnesota, right along the Minnesota river bottoms. And the guy I bought these agates from and this copper piece from worked in the gravel pit. And he used to sit on the belt and grab agates and put them in buckets, and that's what I bought from him. But he told me, he said, this piece of copper, he said, I didn't see it going up the belt. And it went up and it went down into the crusher to crush the stuff down to, the size that they wanted it down to. It seized up the crusher. It just, and it shut it down. And you can see the teeth marks in this piece of copper. I've got it downstairs. It's incredible. So that copper that the glaciers picked up from the, Isle Royal, northern Minnesota, Upper Peninsula, Michigan area, following the tract of Lake Superior down all the way to just a few miles away from where I live. And I've gone around Minnesota and I bought copper pieces from farmers for years. But that's the biggest one I've ever seen, and it shut down a crusher. How about that?
Well, okay, you're the rock guy, okay? Not Robert Plant is the rock guy too as well, but you're the real rock guy. How much can you deface a piece of red granite with a copper chisel? How much headway do you make?
I don't know, man. That's going to be a pecking technique. So you're not going to have, well, I shouldn't say this, maybe they developed a good technique, but it's going to be hard to make manageable cuts into that rock and get the kind of precision and detail that you see on these obelisks. That's absolutely incredible. It almost looks like it's mathematically, you notice how you have like the same symbol, like let's say it's a bird or an ankh or something like that. They're like perfect. And you look at another one, and it's identical. It's not close or similar. It's the same.
Right.
How the hell do they do that?
I don't know.
I mean,
I don't know.
With such precision.
Such precision.
And then polished.
I was at, the Met in New York. It's got one of the great Egyptian wings on the planet. There's, the Louvre's got it.
It's amazing.
It's amazing. And in one of the display cases, so Rita and I are walking through, and they have this tablet there, and it is carved. I'm going to say it's 2.5 feet tall, maybe 1.5 feet wide, round on the top. Totally covered with these beautiful, tiny hieroglyphics, cut with the precision of a diamond cutter in friggin' Belgium, right? It looks brand new, right? So Rita and I are standing there and we're looking at this, and it's red granite. And there's a little card at the bottom, and it says, this was carved in 2400 BC with these tools. Right? Okay. Now, and right next, so you're looking, and right next to it is this little copper, looks like a nail, right? A little copper nail, and another one that looks like a scalpel, a little copper scalpel, like a little butter knife. And those two tools are sitting there on top of a little leather pouch that these tools were kept in. And you look at those copper tools, right? And you look at this tablet, and it says that they were found together, right? And you're looking at the two, and you're like, that's BS. There's no way that carved
That's what you're telling
that,
me?
right? There's just no way. It's impossible. I don't even think that it would scratch the granite. I don't believe that.
Hardness-wise, it wouldn't. It wouldn't.
No. But yet it's in a display case. Thousands of people walk by it every single day, and that becomes their truth. It's in a museum.
Exactly.
It's in a museum. It's at the Met. It's been vetted, right? I just don't buy it. And as somebody that works with rock, when you hear that, because we're talking about not the Iron Age, but the Bronze Age, right? Where and the copper age, where copper was soft. It was soft. The technology of getting it to the point where it is even usable over time didn't come till after that. And that's what they want us to believe.
They had to mix it with something else to give it strength. I mean, native copper is very soft. I mean, you can take it and you can pound it on something hard and it'll flatten. I mean, it's soft.
And
very malleable, as they say.
That's very malleable. And you would have to mix it with, in the beginning, I could be wrong here, everybody, just save the email. But I think it was like arsenic, right? There was something that they added to it in the beginning, and it kind of, changed it. But later they added tin, and then you had bronze. But that was technology that didn't happen for a couple of 100 years after the alleged dates of... Yeah,
but the Bronze Age went for quite a while. That was a harder material. And then, of course, you got zinc and copper to make brass, and that's not a hell of a lot harder, but I just don't think that's what they... You know what? I think that they were using diamond, because if you think about it, Africa is where most of the diamonds came from back in the old world, and it's not that... Well, hell, Egypt's right there, right? So maybe they were using diamond. Maybe these tools were used with diamond to cut the things. I mean, I don't know how they did it, but I don't buy the copper either. No way.
Yeah.
And I struggle with the bronze tool.
I remember standing at the Met, and we're out of time, so I'm going to say thank you. But really quickly, standing at the Met, they have a bunch of sarcophagi that are ginormous, right? And they had this one from, 2400, 2300, old, right? Old dynasty. And it's black, and it's probably 20 feet long. It's probably 8 feet wide, with a lid on the top. It's standing like 6 feet tall as I am. The lid is a foot thick, 2 feet thick of black granite. And I go and I look on the inside of this thing, and it's completely covered with precision hieroglyphics.
Yes.
And you knock on this thing, and it's like knocking on the ground.
On the ground, it's so dense and hard.
It's so dense and hard.
It.
And how did they move it? How did they carve it? How did I don't understand. I really don't.
You know what it is,
understand.
Jim? Here's the bottom line. I don't think we have a clue. The bottom line is we don't have a clue how they did it. We have not figured it out yet. It's one of the great mysteries that still has yet to be solved, and I think that's super cool. And you know what? It's okay. We don't have to have all the answers right now, but you know what? I guess the problem I have is don't give me this sunshine that just doesn't make any sense and try to run that one by me, because I'm not buying it, and I don't buy it. And I think it's okay to say you don't know. I wish more people would say that. And people get mad at me sometimes on the show when we don't get an answer.
Right.
Well, sometimes the answer is you don't know, and if it is, you need to say it. And this is one of those times.
Yeah, look, I can tell you what it's not. It's not chicken bones and copper chisels. Scott, thank you so much, and safe travels to the both of you. We'll see you in 3 short weeks.
Yes, I can't wait, and thanks for having me on here. And you did really good, but you're not even close on your guesses. But that's okay. You're still a great guy, and I love you.
Yeah, I'll get it out of you with a couple shots of vodka on February 7th. Scott.
All right. I'm a cheap date. Let's do it.
Thank you so much, my friend.
All right, Jim. Take care.
Scott Wolter. Again, hookedx.com. Very simple. ScottWoltersAnswers.blogspot. Both of the links are over at JimmyChurchRadio.com. Another great conversation with Scott Wolter. Fade to Black's executive producers Rita Camarion. Shows produced by Hill J. Palm, Renee, Dennis, and Bob. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vito, and Mark D. Kovar. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy, SpaceboyMusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, and syndication is KGRA, The Planet. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2019 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tomorrow night, right here, Dr. Daniel Estulin, the Bilderberger Group, all night long. Until then, everybody be safe. Go back, Lee Tepe.